Good morning, everyone. This is Saundra and Charles, your faithful servants, to tell you a little bit more about Dash. Today, we're going to be talking about timekeeping, meal, and rest periods. And he's going
Saundra,
to, am I wrong?
it is time off.
Oh, that's right. That's
Time off,
right.
how to set it up and how to keep it going.
That's right. Guess what? I sent you an email before we had to juggle things around. So we are now talking about today, time off, how to keep it and how to set it up. And we're going to make sure that you understand it. So that email I sent you out yesterday, that schedule is all different. Anyway, Charles, with all of my little fumbling this morning, please take it away so I don't make any more mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Saundra. So here is the form that we have that we would send out to you whenever you say that you have an accrual, a time off policy that you want to set up. Say that it's like, oh, well, we want to do vacation. We want to do something a little bit different than the one that's required in the state of California, or we just want to have the state of California one, which should already be available to you. Or you want to have a group policy or separated policy. I've had people where they've done annual awards for anniversaries, birthdays, all sorts of things. And we can do all those. And this form helps us determine how to set it up, because there's a lot of factors that are involved in this, things that you may not take into consideration when you tell us, well, we want a time off policy, given such and such and this. Well, there may be other factors that are involved. So of course we send this out to you, and we have, of course, where you'd let us know who you are when you're sending it back, and then you try to complete this form. And it does say that you may have more than one entry for the same type of accrual if different employee groups accrue differently, such as your salaried versus your hourly employees, right? You may have different accruals for them. You may have different accruals for full-time versus part-time. We can set those all up. And so you can put the accrual name right here, what type it is, sick, vacation, PTO, any kind that you have. And then we also have the accrual method, which method is being used to calculate the hours that are accrued. Now you can do an annual award, say 24 hours of sick pay awarded to the employees at the beginning of each year. You can do a per pay period accrual, which is what I've seen most at this level. Is basically it's going to be, say, they get 5 hours of vacation time every pay period, or we can even exclude people who didn't work that pay period. They'd have to be actively working that pay period in order to receive the accrual. We can do that as well. And then we have hourly, and this is the one where it's like they get 0.05 hours vacation or PTO for every hour that they work. And we can tell the system which hours are eligible for that. So we can say that only regular time, overtime, and double time are eligible for that, but not things like bereavement or jury duty. So we can set it up that way. And you even indicate right here, if hourly accrual, please indicate which hours should be used in the calculation. You can say it by either all hours, worked hours, regular and salary only, or a specific earning code or code groups. And you just tell us which types that you want it to do. We can set up a probationary period. Now, there's two ways to set up that kind of a system. A probationary period is one where the employees can accrue time, but they cannot use it. The other type that people use is they say they don't accrue anything for the first 3 months, and then their accrual starts then. So we can set it up to where where it starts after 3 months, right? So what that means is that when we set up the policy and then you start attaching it to the employees, you can do that when you hire them. You don't have to wait 3 months for that. So that's the ways that are set up. And so you have that information here, and then you have the accrual table. Now, we can do, like I said, length of service, and here's where we would do something like this is where the accrual starts, monthly, right? So it's like 3 months, the accrual starts, and it would be, say, 5.2 hours, and then we can tell it how much of a balance it can have, a maximum balance. Like they can only have a maximum balance of 48 hours or 56 or what have you. This total max is different. What this means is that it adds together the balance and the used, right? And it can never be more than this number. So it will lower how the balance depending upon how much is being used. Now, so this one, we don't use that often. Nobody has that kind of, not that many of our clients have that in their policies. Carryover max, this is where we can tell it at the end of the year, how many of their hours can carry over into the next year, right? And so we can even identify for that which code it will go into. For instance, I used to work someplace where if you had any sick time at the end of the year, it would be portion of that would be converted into vacation time, right? It would add it to the vacation balance. So we can do it where it can go back into the original code, or it can go into a different PTO code. And we also have things in here like max negative, max used, max accrual. I do need to indicate, though, that this will not keep you from entering from somebody using vacation time. It will give you a warning when they have, it will just give you a warning, but you can still have them go into the negative. And then also below that, we have explanations of the different sections. Okay. And then we have the accrual year, what time frame is being used for the accrual's 12-month period. That's when we have to reset their usage, right? Instead of having the usage carry over from the previous year, where it ends up that they've used 536 vacation hours, we reset that based upon what you tell us. Should it be January 3rd? Should it be the employee's anniversary date? What have you? And also it goes into how we would handle negative balances. And then what you want to appear on the check stub. Do you want the hours, dollars, and so forth? And then eligibility rules. Okay, so this is where we can set it up to where it adds this automatically to new hires or to a specific group of new hires, right? So we can set up groups that will have a particular PTO policy, and others that will have another PTO policy based upon which group they're assigned. And that's something that you set up when you are hiring the employee. And so we can do that, or we can have it where they're automatically added to all employees, or where you add them manually. And so, and that's all in here. And then if you have any additional notes, you let us know. And so what you do is you fill this out for every PTO policy or variation thereof that you have, and send it to us, and we set up the policy. Now, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. Now, where do we set that up? We set that up here in Dash. So let me go ahead and go back in, because it logged me out, because it does this to us too. It's a security feature, because if I walked away from my desk, if I were at a office job, we want it to log you out instead of somebody else coming up and leaving a funny note or two. So, okay, so here is our company, our demo company, and I'm just going to go to company level here. Now this part you probably will not have access to. We don't recommend you, if you do, going into this, because this is where we set up the company level, and it's the one that's got all the different bells and whistles that we're trained to know. So we would just go to company and go to PTO. Why am I showing you to this? I'm showing it so that you can see what it is that we do in here, because it may give you a better understanding of how we enter this information. So we have this sick policy, and it's 1 hour of sick for every 30 hours worked. That's the California, that's the one that's required by California, or also the annual award of 3 sick days, 24 hours. And so when I'm in here, we create the code, and we give it a description, and then we tell it what to accrue on. And this is if we have an accrual that's based on hourlies, right? Typically the default is per pay period, but if we need it to accrue per hour, we would tell it per hour. And then when we say accrue on, we're telling it what hours are eligible for that. Again, like say regular pay, overtime, double time, hours that they've actually worked. So we've set up a code group, including just those earning codes, and we attach it here. So it will only use those ones to calculate the accrual. And then we tell it what we're going to reduce it by. Now, what that means is that every time this sick code is used, it will reduce the balance on the employee. And we can go ahead and we have sections for minimum hours or max accrue on. That is usually used to say that, you know, they could only be accruing on, they have to work these many hours in order to accrue anything, that kind of thing. We've got the frequency, of course, is per hours, and we have it to show the hours balance on the check stub, and we can even put in a description for it and a divisor. So if we wanted to say that it's going to tell you the number of days, we could put the divisor by 8. All right, so it will divide the figure by 8, and that will tell you how many days they have available instead of just the number of hours. So I'm going to change that back to 1. And then we also have where it shows the used on check stub as well. So we can actually show usage. And that's where, you know, resetting the balances every year comes into play. Because if, you know, somebody looked at their check and goes, I didn't use 500 hours of sick time this year. So we have that reset. And we can, as I said, we can even have it where it accrues only for paid employees. And then we have some other things that have been added in here that we don't really use. So I go to advanced options, and this is where we set it to clear to 48. That means that only 48 hours can carry over, but we do have it where it says never. So I can set it to where it clears on any particular date, like the employee anniversary or the beginning of the year, or even calendar year end. So that's where it will clear balances, basically the usage balance, and it will take whatever is listed as carryover and carry it over into the code that we tell it to do. And so that's where we do transfer balance to. So we can tell it we want to transfer it to the sick code, or like I said in, you know, the example I had from a previous job, we can tell it to transfer it to vacation. So we have, you know, other information in here that is not, again, not generally used. Then we go to accrual table, and this is where we set up the accruals, right? And so we have a rate of 1. So this is where we tell it 0 means that it's going to start from the date of hire. If we wanted it to start 3 months after, we would put 3, and so forth. And we have a rate of 1. And about so that's 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. Balance maximum is 48, and the carryover maximum is 48. So it's never going to be more than that. And then we also have eligibility and probation. So here we have a probation of 90 days, right here. And it defaults to the date of hire, but we can actually use another date if necessary. And you can actually have it show on the check stub or not. And then we also have, again, the negatives and front loading. Now, the front loading is used, let's say that you're attaching this to an employee, it will front load the hours, meaning they get their award right away. And that's used like for the annual ones where they're supposed to get 24 hours every year, you know, at the beginning of the year, their annual award. When you're hiring somebody, you can have that 24 hours given to them right at the date of hire. Let's say it's in July. And this is how we set that up. So we set this up based upon the information you give us. And what do you do then? Well, if we have this set up to automatically add to all new employees or particular employees, let's see, that would be under the advanced, it's under eligibility and probation. So we would have the new employee filter, active employees, or let's say full-time, right? And then whenever you have somebody new, it's automatically added. That's it. That's all you'd have to do. The only thing you would need to make sure of is that you categorize the employee in the appropriate one if that's how you're using it. If you have full-time and part-time and you policies and you don't want to mix the two, you'd make sure that you have the employee listed as a part-time. And we can show you where that information feeds in when we're setting that up so that when you're adding a new employee, you're always categorizing them correctly. If you have this where it's a manual one where you're adding this to the employees, is you would just go to employee, and I'm going to go ahead and leave here because I'm not keeping anything. And you would go to say Raggedy Ann, and you would go to time off. And this is where you would add it. And it's kind of like if you were adding direct deposit or deductions. We keep the format, the interface here, roughly the same for each one. Is you would see the list of their policies, and then you can click add at the bottom to add a new one. Now here, this is where you would see their probation. So if you don't have it showing up on their checks, but you want to see what their probation is, you can see it right here. And the minute that probationary period is over, all that probation time turns into available hours. And so we do have where you can override items. Why would you override it? Well, you would override it if you have somebody who's contracted at a different rate than what is set up for the company, but you don't want to set up an entire new policy because it's just one employee. So you can put in a different rate, carryover maximum, all of that. And we would just set up the policy to follow the overrides set up on the employees. You can do an adjusted length of service. As I said, this usually defaults to their hire date. But if you have somebody who goes from part-time to full-time, and they're going to be eligible now for the full-time vacation policy, you don't want to use their hire date necessarily because they weren't hired at part-time. At full-time, they're hired at part-time. So you put in the date that they started as a full-time employee, and it will use that to use the correct rate of accrual based upon that length of service. And so the last accrue date, this is what I use when I'm trying to stop an accrual. I can automatically put in an end date, but I also put in an accrue date at the end of the next century, 12/31/2100. Why? Because the last accrue date will keep an accrual from occurring until that date has passed. And this gets tricky when you're dealing with the annual awards. You want to make sure that this date is not the next January unless you're front loading them already. Unless you have it set up to front load, 24 hours when they start hired, but you want to make sure that they get their accrual when it comes time for the year to turn over. And that's how you make sure that the last accrue date you have be in the past if you want to make sure that they accrue on the next date for those annual awards. And so you could make the adjustments here. You can add here. You just add here, or you can make your adjustments to the existing one and hit save. And then when you're adding a new employee and you're going through that whole list, you just go through the different sections. And then when you get here and you hit create employee, it will create the employee, but it will still give you the option to add at that time the PTO policy to that employee, as well as direct deposit. So you still have that available to you when you're adding a brand new employee. And again, when you have an employee who is making a change to their time off policy, you can do it right here. And also when you're here, you can see their history. And so I'm going to go to Raggedy Ann. And you'll see their history here. And this shows you what their accruals are, both what they've earned, what they've used, and what the balance is on a check-by-check basis. And so you can see here, this is useful for auditing, right? To make sure the policy is working correctly, because you can look here and go, wait a minute, that's not right. They should have a different balance. They shouldn't be maxing out at this. I need to make sure that the policy is correct. You contact us and we go through and make sure it's running correctly, and then we can adjust their balance going forward to make sure that they still get what they should. So this is a useful tool, and I've even used this by taking this right here. And of course we do have reports that can pull this information, but when I'm just dealing with one employee, you can just paste it into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I, make your modifications. And then I work with this, because then I can say, take this and send it to an employee and say, this is what this is. Now, also, if you have our ESS service, The employees will also see their history, what they've earned, used, and balanced on a per pay period basis. We use our own version of employee self-service here, and that's what I've checked in the past to see is like, well, how much did I earn? How much did I accrue? So your employees using employee self-service will have this same information here as well. And I think that's it. I'm ready for any questions.
Okay, Charles, we have a couple questions here, but first, could you please go back to the place where you put an end date in or change the date and do that a little bit more slowly?
Sure. The PTO class right here?
Yeah.
Yes.
And with the adjusted date and the last accrue date, I was confused and I thought maybe somebody else might be too.
Sure. Now, the adjusted length of service. Now, the example I use is when you have a part-time employee who goes to full-time. Mm-hmm. Now, what generally speaking, my experience has been that you do not want that person to accrue at the rate that is set up for how long they've worked with you since they were first hired, because they were hired as a part-time employee, not a full-time. You generally want the accrual to use the starting date of when they became a full-time employee. The reason is most vacation policies have different rates depending upon how long that person has worked for you, and it defaults to the higher date that uses that as the length of service. But if you use an adjusted length of service, you can tell them, don't use the higher date, use this date, the date that they became, say, for example, a full-time worker. And so that way, they're not accruing at a higher rate of accrual than they should for the time that they've been a full-time employee, or whatever instance that may be. So that's what you would put that in there, is what date to use for the start of their accrual.
Okay. And then the last accrue date, we currently have it at 3/31/2022, and you said something about making it the next decade. What was the reason for that?
Let's say there's somebody that, let's say you have somebody who's going from full-time to part-time and they're no longer eligible for an accrual. You don't have a part-time accrual policy. What I do with those is because I like to make sure that it's not going to get reactivated, is I put in an end date right here, right, of whatever day they went to part-time, say, in the example, and then I put a last accrue date of 12/31/2100. Why? Because the system won't accrue until after that date has passed. Okay, it uses the last accrual date to know when to accrue next.
So if you renew annually, that date would stay 2022. So then in March 31st, 2023, there would be a new set of accrual hours.
Well, let's say we have an annual award, and this date is actually, say that it should be January. But
Okay.
let's say it says you're hiring somebody new. And you attach the policy. And when you attach the policy, it will show you what the last accrue date is. It automatically populates. And let's say it populates with January 1st of 2024. It won't accrue again until after that date has passed, which means they may not get their accrual at the beginning of the year because of that date in there. So what you would do for those is you would make sure, in order to make sure that they get the next accrual, you would make sure that this accrual date is in the past, right?
Okay.
Right. So that is an instance that comes up only when you're doing new hires and you're attaching the policy. It may generate with a future date for the last accrue date, and you don't necessarily want it to do that, simply because then it could block the accrual from occurring then, because that date's not passed yet.
Okay.
So
I see we lost Charlotte, but she did have a question, and it might apply to the rest of you. How much of this is done by PayrollCentric and how much of it is done by the administrator?
Okay, well, what I can tell you is that this part is done by the administrator. They fill this form out.
Which is the other question is, how do they get that form? I didn't even know that form existed, my dear.
Oh, we send it to them. They say, we're going to set up a policy. We send them this, and then they fill it out and send it back to us.
So they could simply send in a ticket requesting the accrual form so that they can complete it for you, and then PayrollCentric will set up the accruals on our system for them.
Yes.
If there is a new employee, though, do they follow along what's already been set up like you showed us, or do they need to ask PayrollCentric to do that on their behalf?
That depends. That depends.
Okay.
But let me get back to the question of what is done by PayrollCentric. So
Okay.
PayrollCentric will provide the form, the administrator will fill it out, and then PayrollCentric will be the one that goes into the company level and deals with the PT and sets up the policy here.
Okay.
What the administrator will then do is go to the employee or employees and set it up on them.
In other words, you set up the master company setup, and then once that's done, the administrator at the company, not PayrollCentric, goes in and makes sure that everything is good for each employee.
Right. And the reason being is we don't know which employee would have which policy. We don't have that information at hand. And because, and that's something that's done, our clients will be the ones who will be doing the employee section, but the setting up of the policy itself for the company, that's what we do simply because of the different variables attached to it. Once that policy is set up, all the client, the administrator, our client has to do is attach it to the employees. Now, back to your original question, if you have a new employee, the administrator can set it up if the employee falls under a pre-existing policy. All they have to do is attach it when they hire them, and that's it. But if there's adjustments that need to be made, then it depends. It may be just simply something like a rate override. If this person has a contract that says that they get a different rate than what the company does, the rest of the company does, or they are like, we can do an adjusted length of service. That's another thing. Let's say this person is going to be hired and they're already at an elevated level of accrual, right?
Like
not just the introduction. Yeah, not just the introduction, right? The introduction is you get like 5 hours per pay period, but they're supposed to be at the next level, which is 10 hours per pay period, right? So we can adjust the length of service to the past as if they've been there for 2 or 3 years so that they get that rate of accrual going forward.
Okay.
Right. And so those are the different things you can do on an employee. But if we need to set up an entirely new policy because this is the first of a series of workers who are going to have a different policy, then that's where we come in and set that policy up just like we set up the original ones.
Okay. Good thing we're recording this because then Charlotte will be able to hear it on our recording.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say to you who are still on board with us is it is a requirement by the state of California that you tell your employees what hours they've used and what hours they have left, even if it's on a Post-it note. So the best thing to do is to request that this gets put on their pay stubs. Of course, employee self-service is there and they can find it there. If you don't have that, let me know. I'm happy to help you get that done. And if they do not have employee self-service, it would be on their pay stub that you hand them out when they get paid. Or you print them out from your own Dash portal if you just have a few employees. I think I don't see any more questions. So if we don't have any more, then let's talk about the next week. It's a surprise because we had to juggle a few things. We had a couple guest speakers who have not responded yet, so I had to juggle everything around. So please be sure to take a look at the webinar invitation for next week, and we'll let you know what we're doing because even I don't know at this moment. So I am hopeful that you'll join us anyway, and you will be delighted with whatever topic we come up with. And again, always send me an email if you want to know something about something, then we will definitely add it to our list of webinars. We hope you find them enjoyable, and we also hope you find them informative. That's really the purpose of all of this. You're welcome, Yesenia. But we love to do these for our clients. If you have not yet subscribed to the PayrollCentric presentations channel, please do, because as soon as I upload a new video, you'll get a notification that it's there. The link is in our meeting invite for the webinars. It's at the middle part of the page. So copy that, go to the link, and you can see all kinds of stuff that we've done in the past. So this is yours. It's all for you, and we are happy to do it. Charles, excellent job once again. So thank you so much. for spending your time with us today. We want to wish you a great day. Thank you so much for being part of PayrollCentric's family. Bye-bye for now.